Shabbat Shalom. So I was sitting here reading I'm in Isaiah chapter 14, and in verse 1 it says, "For Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob." Okay, so from my understanding here, in prophecy, you have the house of Judah and those men. You have the house of Israel, or the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and you have the house of Jacob, which represents an unrepentant people that are to be rejoined at some points in some way, however the Father wills, with reuniting the lost sheep of the house of Israel and the men of Judah, and the restoration of a kingdom and the understanding of prophecy. It says in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 5, it says, "Yahweh has broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers." Now, a staff, a ruling staff or a ruling scepter, it just depends on the context there. But it also talks about in Isaiah the rod. Okay, so the rod is symbolically an instrument of correction, and it says in Isaiah that the Father says, "I have afflicted you." When he withdraws or his presence from his people, he says, "I have afflicted you." If it says that "I have brought sin against you," that's taken out of context, and what that word in Hebrew means is he's saying it's "I that have afflicted you." The Father cannot bring sin against people; they bring it against themselves. So it should be correctly translated as "I have afflicted you." In chapter 14, verse 6, he says, "He who smote the people in his wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted, and none hindereth." 14 verse 7, it says, "The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yet the fir tree rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, Since thou art laid down, no feller is come up against us." Okay, so now to back up here. We see in prophecy, in the inspired books, go from Isaiah chapter 14 here for a second. I want to go back to Psalms. It's going to be in Psalms chapter 1. Beginning in Psalms chapter 1, he says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the wicked, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of Yahweh, and in his law doth he meditate day and night." It sounds a lot like in the books of Moses. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The unrighteous are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away at the harvest. Therefore the wicked shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For Yahweh knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the unrighteous shall perish. Okay, that's Psalms chapter 1. Now, if we go back to Isaiah 14, beginning in verse 8, it says, Yea, the fir tree rejoiced at these, and the cedars of Lebanon. Now, Isaiah talks about turning sycamores into precious trees like cedars. But the fir trees, if a man can represent a tree, so if you plant a seed of faith, a tree comes up and it bears a man with his men with their wives bear children, which are the fruit of the kingdom, and they also bear righteous works and things of righteousness, and being covered in the righteousness of the Father. Because in scriptures and prophecy, fir trees and cedar trees are used for the building of the temple. So the trees of the earth, or the righteous men of the Father's kingdom, are used in the walls and the floor to be covered in gold, which represents the righteousness of the Father. And they are harvested at the appropriate time for building the house of Yahweh and their calling out of the earth. So, goes on in verse 14, verse 9, it says, The grave from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming, and stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. And they shall speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak, as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, Sheol, and the noise of thy vials, the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Now, this word Lucifer here, that is a Latin word, not an official name. That is a Latin title for a position, for different races. I won't get off on that today, but it goes on to say a few things there. But my point of this passage was, and men being like trees in the scriptures, those that are made fir trees, or the cedars of Lebanon, the fir trees and the cedar trees are used in the walls and the floor to be covered with gold in building the temple, or the house of Yahweh, the place of worship. I thought that's very important to point that out to some people, that there's many things in prophecy. A mountain represents a kingdom, where a foothill is like a high place, or it could be represented as a place of authority, the way I understand it, or an exalted place of some form, whether it's a place of some kind of worship, or a place where there's it just depends on the context. There's many things that are symbolic. He's not just talking about cutting some trees down and piling up some rocks and walking up and down hills and mountains. It's more prophetic than that. where it is literally represents something literal represents something spiritual in a combination of things, and prophecies are fulfilled over and over again. And the Father of heaven will build kingdoms and nations and peoples forever, and there will be no end to his kingdom, because you cannot define it that way. There is it cannot be known to us the number of things that he the Father will accomplish, because he's numbered the hairs on our heads individually, and written our fingerprints individually, giving us unique lives, and each a calling in a body of believers and following Yahweh that no one in this world can control when it comes down to the faith the Father's leading us in that are beyond these things. So I pray you all have a blessed week, that you are studying scriptures and resting, trying to honor the Father in all things. And I love you. Shabbat Shalom.